Hello there. I'm Robert McKay. Usually I tell you what the channel is and I tell you what kind of production it is, but you just saw the title cards. And so this will be a video where I refrain. There are probably some people out there. Hello, Cousin Hector. He's always heckling me. He figures Hector and heckle go together. Well, Cousin Hector, I ain't gonna shut up. So you can turn... No, that didn't turn out as I intended it to. Very few of my jokes do. But it is true that if you don't like the way I do things, if the channel doesn't interest you, if the video doesn't interest you, you are perfectly free to go elsewhere. I do want to say right at the beginning that right over here, I'm cooking my lunch for tomorrow, can of corned beef hash. And so I don't know that I'll need to. Depends on how long I babble. But I may have to hit pause on the screen because I'm recording on my phone. It's set up right there. The lens is there. You can tell because he's looking right at the point of my finger. But I may have to go stir it up some. I like my hash crunchy, and I cook it slow enough that it doesn't burn or anything. So I may have to go. If I do, I'll pause it and come back. You'll see it, my finger reaching and then drawing back at a slightly different angle. Meanwhile, I'm going to pour me some whiskey, and the whiskey is a Clyde Mays single barrel that I got at Total at Kelly Liquors. Oh, it's my Rebel Distillers collection that I got at Total Wine. It's 102 proof. It was barreled in February 3rd of 2017. It is 5 years old, so they dumped it in 2022. And I love the label. It's old-timey. If you've ever watched Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, you know that some things are old-timey. There's the guy, Homer Stokes, I believe his name was. Been a while since I've seen the movie. Who got up in the big, well shoot, I thought I'd set the camera up where I wouldn't have to shift, and I did anyways. But at the big climactic gathering scene of the movie, Homer Stokes is trying to turn the crowd against the Soggy Bottom Boys, and he, among other things, he says they ain't even old-timey. And of course, this has taken place in the Depression, the 20s or 30s, so old-timey then would have been back in the 1800s. This label looks more like something that they would have had in the days of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And if you ain't seen that movie, go watch it. Now, if you know anything about Greek mythology, you'll recognize elements of the story of Odysseus, of the Odyssey. I used to know more about Greek mythology than I do now. When I was a kid, we had to learn that stuff, Greek and Roman mythology. But it hasn't been all that useful to me, except when I'm talking about stuff like this. Having poured some whiskey, babbled about a label, babbled about a movie. What is this video about? Well, as you know if you're watching it, it is an installment in my Whisky Basic series, and somehow I deleted the whole thing, which is a frustration, making me 36 videos worth of extra work. But every single one of those 36 videos will be better than the original. Even though I'm recording on my phone at the kitchen table, this setup is the best I've ever had. And by that you can see the truth of the thoroughly amateur bit on this video. Maybe it's because of the hash frying over here, but this nose is coming in weird. Anyway, the subject of this video, and if you got this far, if I'm remembering correctly, this is the 9th video. The way I do it is I ask a question and then I answer it. That's how it worked out without my planning it on the original Whisky Basic series, and I see no reason to alter that. I've already got enough extra work. Why should I make more for myself? But the question I propose to answer tonight is, what is aging whiskey? And I'll show you the color of this stuff. Nice and red, and there's just no way to make it unless I pull it back, maybe. There, now you're kind of looking straight, but as I move it forward, it has to go lower to be straight on because the camera is at a tilt. But the color of this whiskey comes from aging. The flavor and the aroma of this whiskey comes from aging. But what is that? This is a question I could not have answered 4 years ago. I say 4 years ago. Yeah, at this point 4 years ago, I had been drinking whiskey less than a month. I'm recording it, well, it's 12:50 now here, so it's the 4th of October. My first drink of whiskey was on September 20th, 2021. So maybe, in the 3-4 weeks between the 20th of September and the 4th of October, maybe I had learned about aging. But prior to September 20th, definitely, I didn't know what aging whiskey meant. I'd heard the term. I'd heard of aged liquor, but I didn't know what it meant. I honestly did not know where whiskey got its color. It tastes right, so it must be the aroma from the cooking hash. Oh well, life goes on. Bet y'all didn't know that. Thank you, Captain Obvious. No duh, Dolowitz. But whiskey, all liquor, when it comes off the still, is crystal clear. In fact, I have this opinion, and maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but it's my view, that clear liquor is clearer even than pure water. But that's how it comes off the still. It's perfectly crystal clear. Any color that there was in the mash, it leaves behind as the vapor rises up through the still, whether it's a column still or a pot still, and goes into condensation and out spout. Whether it's the worm and the flakes stand out in the woods, or a pipe yay big, yay big, in a modern industrial distillery, comes out clear. Aging whiskey, among other things, gives it the color. Now, there are all sorts of people who have all sorts of stories about how aging whiskey began. There's the story which the Heaven Hill Distillery manages somehow never to dispute, because they have a brand of whiskey named Elijah Craig. There's the story that way back in the late 1700s, early 1800s, a Baptist preacher, and there really was such a person, he really was such a was a Baptist preacher. He appears in John T. Christian's History of the Baptists, which doesn't obviously, because it came out in the early 20th century, didn't have access to a lot of sources that newer histories do, but perhaps is more faithful to the spirit of Baptists. Elijah Craig was a Baptist preacher in Kentucky. If I'm not mistaken, and I could be, I'm not a historian, I didn't look this up. If I'm not mistaken, he went into Kentucky while it was still a county of Virginia. My furthest back ancestor I know of was born in Henry County, Virginia in 1799, and back then Kentucky had just barely ceased to be again, if I'm remembering correctly, had just barely ceased to be a Virginia county. Mighty big county, ain't it, wasn't it? But at the time of the Revolutionary War and the Treaty of Paris, wherein Britain recognized the independence of 13 separate, distinct, sovereign states, their claims mostly ran all the way to the Mississippi River. But the story is that Elijah Craig was the first one to make bourbon by aging his whiskey in charred oak barrels. Well, that's not true. It's a pretty story. And it makes Elijah Craig whiskey seem even better. I'd want to judge it on the taste, not on the story. But in France, they'd been aging cognac in charred barrels for a long time. And while certainly not everyone on the American frontier knew that, some surely did. Charred barrels would not have been a novelty. But most varieties of American whiskey, by law, have to age in a charred, new oak barrel. Not all do. The new category of what they're calling American single malt does not, as I understand it, again, I have not looked it up, I could be wrong, it's not the point of the video, as I understand it, does not need to have a new charred barrel. Corn whiskey under American law cannot age in a new charred barrel. If it does, then it's bourbon whiskey. If it's a used charred barrel or a new uncharred barrel, then it's corn whiskey. And the cutoff between the two is 80%. Corn whiskey has to be at least 80% corn. Now, if you take something that's 79% corn and age it in either a new uncharred barrel or a used charred barrel, it won't be corn whiskey. It'll just have to say American whiskey. It can't legally be bourbon whiskey. But that's tangential. The thing is whether it's a charred barrel or an uncharred barrel, a new barrel or a used barrel. You put whiskey in it, you put it in a rickhouse, and you let time and the weather operate. Now, just sitting there, even if the temperature and humidity and everything never change, the whiskey will soak into the barrel and it will pick up influences from the barrel, and those will diffuse through the whiskey so that after a time it'll pick up color, it'll pick up flavor. The whole point of a charred barrel is that first the charcoal layer filters out impurities, and then underneath that, where it's not charred but the heat has still affected the composition of the wood, it picks up chemicals that give it flavor. Vanilla, cinnamon, brown sugar, caramel, butterscotch. These are all flavors that come from the wood. And you can toast a barrel either without charring it or before charring it. Charring is where the flame actually touches the wood and scorches it and turns it to charcoal. Toasting doesn't necessarily even have a flame. You can have an infrared heat emitter, and as long as it's enough heat, it will toast the barrel. You can have a flame that does not touch the barrel, and it will toast the barrel. The heat affects the wood because there's no charring. It affects it in somewhat different ways, giving different flavors. And you put the whiskey in that barrel, toasted, charred, both, and put it in a rickhouse where the weather can get at it, where the temperature goes up and down, where the humidity goes up and down, and these changes move the whiskey into and out of the wood. And as that happens, it picks up flavor and color. And over time, it picks up more flavor and more color, and that is aging the whiskey. 16 minutes and almost 17, and it's counting. Now, the different barrels and the different climates will have an effect on how the whiskey ages. In a cooler climate, certain chemical processes have time to work, which they don't have in a warmer climate. In a more temperate climate where the fluctuations are less, those processes have time to work. Where the fluctuations are large, they don't have time to work. And that's why some whiskey, if you can take the same stuff off the same still, the same run, if you're using a pot still, age half of it in Texas, half of it in Kentucky, same barrels from the same cooperage, it will be different. Because in Texas, some of those processes don't have time to work. Others do. The greater climatic weather changes cause different interactions with the barrel than up in Kentucky. The barrel makes a difference. Scotland and Ireland buy tons of used bourbon barrels because under American law, remember, bourbon has to age in a new charred barrel. Once you've used it, you cannot use it again for bourbon. So they ship them to Scotland, they ship them to Ireland, and they use them over and over and over again because their laws don't require a new charred barrel. They get a barrel from us, and to them it's a first fill barrel. And after a few years they'll dump it and they'll use it for second fill and then for third fill. And they'll keep using it until the whiskey just isn't able to extract anything more from the wood. It's all gone into the previous barrels. But regardless of the climate, regardless of the barrel, that's what aging whiskey is. It gives it the color, it gives it the flavor, gives it the aromas. And that is one of the main differences between the whiskey you buy in the liquor store and moonshine. And moonshine, by definition, is illegal whiskey. Whiskey that the government did not license to distill and did not receive the excise tax. They're putting out unaged whiskey in the liquor stores, calling it moonshine, but by definition, it's not moonshine. It's like calling an elephant a tabby cat. You can call it that, but it ain't that. To be moonshine, by definition, it has to be illegal. But take some of that unaged whiskey, Buffalo Trace White Dog. I like their #1 mash. It comes in a pint bottle, absolutely crystal clear. I like it. But all you ever are going to get from it is corn, rye, and barley, because it has not touched wood. It has not picked up color. It has not picked up flavor. And so this, or any other aged whiskey, is going to have more complexity of flavor, more complexity on the nose, more color, and there's nothing wrong with either. As I said, I like that Buffalo Trace White Dog now and again. Usually I prefer something that's aged because it has that greater complexity, has those extra flavors and color. But that's aging whiskey. I'm actually going to finish before 22 minutes. Doopsie-da.